about going over there to where those are?
What's that?
Huh? Oh, over in the cornfield? To the cemetery? No, no, no. I know you're talking about going to the Stevens Farm.
Start whenever.
Okay. This is called the Stevens Farm. Or the Stevens Homestead. Okay. All right. I'm Erica Butcher.
I'm Ada Woodson-Adams.
And we are interviewing Irita Goins Canady at the Stevenson Homestead in Waterford, Ohio, for the African American presence. No, African American presence in the Ohio River Valley Oral History Project. Can you spell your name? Irita. Canady is Canady. My maiden name is Goins, Goins. All right. Can you tell us a little bit about where were you born? Where did you grow up, and when were you born? The background. I was born March 28th, 1949 in Zanesville. But my parents moved to Toledo and then on to Michigan probably about the time I was a year old. And I've lived in Michigan ever since. And can you tell us like what schools you attended in Michigan and what town in Michigan? Okay, elementary school was Millet. We lived in a rural area, and I went there from kindergarten through 6th, and then I went to Waverly Junior High School 7 through 9, and then Waverly High School 10 through 12. And what year did you graduate from high school? 1967. Why did your family move to Michigan? Work. They had better jobs by going to Michigan, and my father did. I'm not sure what work he was doing when they first went there, but he worked for Diamond Rio, and then he ultimately worked for General Motors. It was Oldsmobile at that time, and during the time we were growing up, he did 2 or 3, 4 jobs at a time to support the family and have things that they wanted the family to have and enjoy. Did you go back and forth to Zanesville and visit relatives? Do you still have relatives there? We, until 1967, when my maternal grandfather died, James Adams, we would go to Zanesville 2 or 3 times a year. We would go like Easter, spring break, and then we would go down. Then they were having the Adams reunion, which was at the Adams homestead about 3 miles south of Malta on the same side of the river. And we would go to those reunions, and then sometimes I did spend some time with cousins. And when I was little, I spent long periods of time with my Aunt Myrtie, who lived in Malta. And Aunt Myrtie was married to my grandfather's brother. And her husband was? Harrison, Edwin Harrison Adams. Everybody called him Harrison. And while we're on that, let me just put a little plug in for them. In 1941, they had a truck, and the Kate Love Simpson Library started a bookmobile service between McConnellsville and Chesterhill. And they used their truck and converted the truck into a bookmobile to go between the two and do the bookmobile service between McConnellsville and Chesterhill. Did they tell you stories about what it was like to be the bookmobile, or did you ever hear any stories about that? Or no, what inspired them to have the bookmobile? Well, they were both, education was important to both of them. And Aunt Myrtie was a nurse. She had her degree for nursing, and education was important to them. In fact, my great-grandfather, James Adams, the first James Adams, taught school in West Virginia. I'm not quite sure where, but he was a teacher for a while in West Virginia.
And that's your mother's side of the family?
That's my mother's side of the family.
And where would they know where did they get the books? They collect them from?
I'm assuming from the library, whatever, and then like where people would throw trash out, or if somebody had died and there were books or whatever, they would save the books and use them and, give to the library as part of the library collection.
Do you know how long they had the bookmobile?
Oh, gal. I really don't know. By the time I came along, I don't know anything about it. I just happened to find it when I was going through the old pictures that my mother had, and came across the pictures of the truck as they were converting it into the bookmobile. And then when I was in McConnellsville, I was reading through the history of the Kate Love Simpson Library, and in the article they said that he was the driver of the truck, and I was like, oh, no, this isn't right. So I made pictures, copies of the prints, and gave to the library, so they have pictures of the bookmobile there now.
So can we, maybe let's go back with your mother's side and your father's side of the family. So her parents and her grandparents, and how far back you can go with that?
Okay, I can go back to my fourth great-grandfather on the Stevens side, which would be my mother's mother, and the Adams, I can go back to my third great-grandfather. So which one, you want me to go with the Adams first?
Yeah.
Okay. My mother was Elizabeth Adams. Her parents are James Lewis Adams Jr. Her mother is Ethel Stevens. And continuing with the Adams, Papa's father was James Lewis Adams, and he married Martha Jane Dooley Mayle. And James's parents were John Adams and Nancy Pritchard. And then John's parents were John and Sarah, but I don't know Sarah's maiden name yet. So I've gone back to my third great-grandfather in that family. Then for my grandmother, Ethel, her parents were Jethro and Eliza Jane Dalton Stevens. Jethro's parents were James William, they called him J.W. or Uncle Bob Stevens, and he was married to Mary Ellen Mayle. And James's father, or his parents, were Michael Stevens and Martha Fletcher. And then Michael's parents were James Stevens and Rachel Plater. So I go back to my fourth great-grandparents.
What first inspired you to be interested in family history, or were you always kind of interested in it and to kind of start searching?
Well, in the early 90s, when we were having the family reunions for my father's siblings, the Goins reunion, I started looking at, I was primarily focusing on the Goins, and I had back to Dad's grandfather, Hiram, or grandparents, Hiram and Rebecca Minard Goins, and Dad never knew his grandparents. And so I was really focusing on just that side of the family. Mom had a lot of information in her Bible about the Adams and the Stevens, and I was just mainly trying to find Dad's grandparents. Well, about 5 years ago maybe, I really got started on the Adams and the Stevens. But I was still looking for Hiram. We found Rebecca, who is buried in Toledo, but we still haven't found Hiram. In the meantime, I went from about I don't know, 400, 500, 600 names in my database to over 10,000 names now in the last few years since I started doing other names.
And what kind of places did you start looking for the records? And did you do that by talking, first beginning to talk to a relative? Or what were some of the things you did to kind of start searching for?
Well, I started coming back to the reunions because I hadn't been here other than funerals. I hadn't been back to Ohio since 1967. Well, I came back in 1986 for the reunion, the Stevens reunion, and then I didn't return until about 4 years ago. But I got in touch with Polly from the reunions and started going down to the courthouse and the libraries, the historical centers, and started digging up. Well, first I looked at census records, and then I started looking up birth and death records. My mother had a lot of old newspaper articles that my grandmother kept and that Aunt Murdy kept, so I was able to add names as they listed the siblings. I was able to add names to my database from that.
I knew they were gonna honk. That's all I wanted to just wait.
Hold on.
Is it recording? The
Yeah.
red light's not on.
I know, I turned it on. Okay, we're good to go.
Take a little nap, right? Uncomfortable. Okay.
Resting up for that field.
Oh, can you tell us a little bit about your mother's Bible and what kind of information was in the Bible and
She
people have it?
she pretty much wrote into her Bible information that had been in her mother's Bible. So it had my grandmother's parents, some information on her aunts and uncles, my grandmother's siblings, some of their children, birth, marriage, death, and then Mom started keeping track of Dad's side of the family, you know, as his brothers and sisters had children.
So your mother, she really had an interest in kind of holding on to she also had an interest in family history and making sure that it was recorded. And
Yes, yeah, for...
did she share a lot of stories with you about the family to kind of pass them on as an oral tradition? Were there some special stories that you remember?
Oh, goodness. I don't know. They're always saying something. I know that just recently she was talking about when they were in West Virginia. They lived in Berryburg, West Virginia. And at the time, they couldn't go to school with the whites. But then the darker colored, as they called it, and the lighter coloreds wouldn't go to school with each other. And so there for a while they weren't going to school, and my grandfather was really upset, and he went to the Board of Education and told them, you know, my kids, of course my uncle was older, but Mom and the other kids, he said those kids will go to school. And there was an empty schoolhouse, and they finally opened it up, so the lighter kids had a way to go to school, but they didn't have transportation to get them to and from school. So between my grandfather and other families in the area, they provided transportation for the kids to go to school.
Did they ever